My name is Layla, and at 34 years old, I found myself standing in the grand ballroom of the Four Seasons Chicago, watching my ex-husband Marcus exchange vows with his 26-year-old mistress. My hands trembled slightly as I clutched the white envelope containing documents that would change everything. 6 months ago, I was his wife of 8 years. Now I was just another guest at his lavish wedding. But I knew something no one else in that room knew, a secret that would turn this fairy tale into a nightmare. Before I reveal what happened next, let me ask you, where are you watching from? If you've ever been betrayed by someone you trusted completely, please like and subscribe, because this story might help heal your heart like it did mine. 8 years ago, I met Marcus at a medical conference in Chicago. I was working as the chief pharmacist at Northwestern Memorial Hospital, managing a team of 15 and loving every minute of my career. The conference was about new cardiovascular treatments, and I literally ran into Marcus during the lunch break. I was carrying a tray with coffee and a sandwich, rushing to catch the afternoon session, when someone bumped into me from behind. The coffee went flying, splashing all over my white blazer. I turned around, ready to be angry, but then I saw him. Marcus stood there mortified, his hands reaching out as if he could somehow reverse what had happened. He was tall, maybe 6 feet 2 inches, with dark hair that had just a hint of gray at the temples. His brown eyes were wide with genuine concern. "I'm so incredibly sorry," he said, already pulling off his own suit jacket. "Please take this. Let me at least pay for the dry cleaning." He insisted I take his business card, and when I read it, I saw he was a cardiac surgeon at Rush University Medical Center. That evening, he called to check if I'd gotten my blazer cleaned. We talked for 2 hours about medicine, our careers, and surprisingly about our favorite restaurants in Chicago. He asked if he could make up for the coffee incident by taking me to dinner that weekend. Our first real date was at RPM Italian on North Clark Street. Marcus showed up with a small bouquet of white roses, saying he'd asked the florist for flowers that matched the blazer he'd ruined. I couldn't help but laugh. We talked until the restaurant practically kicked us out at closing time. He walked me to my car, and under the streetlights, he asked if he could see me again. The next few months were like something from a movie. We explored Chicago together every weekend. Saturdays at the Art Institute, where he pretended to understand modern art just to make me laugh. Sundays walking through Millennium Park, getting ice cream from the vendors even in October when it was far too cold. He'd show up at the hospital with lunch on my busy days, somehow always knowing when I'd forgotten to eat. Marcus had this way of making everything feel special. When I mentioned I'd never been to a Bulls game, he got courtside tickets the next week. When I said I missed my grandmother's apple pie, he spent a whole Saturday learning to bake one from scratch. It turned out terrible, but the effort meant everything. By Christmas, I was completely in love. He invited me to meet his parents in Naperville, and his mother pulled me aside to say she'd never seen her son so happy. That should have been my first sign that Marcus needed external validation to feel complete, but I was too caught up in the romance to notice. He proposed on Valentine's Day, exactly 1 year after we met. He'd rented out the entire observatory deck at the John Hancock Center. When I walked in, there were candles everywhere and a string quartet playing our song. He got down on one knee with a 3-carat Tiffany solitaire, promising to love me forever. Our wedding in October of 2018 was everything I'd dreamed of, and more. We got married at a vineyard in Napa Valley with 200 guests flying in from all over the country. I wore a Vera Wang dress that cost more than I'd ever imagined spending on clothes. Marcus cried when he saw me walking down the aisle, and in that moment, I truly believed we'd grow old together. The reception was held under a tent strewn with fairy lights and white roses. My father gave a speech about how he'd never seen me glow the way I did when I talked about Marcus. Marcus's best man, his colleague Richard, joked about how Marcus had become insufferable at work, constantly showing everyone pictures of me and counting down days until the wedding. Our honeymoon in Santorini was 2 weeks of absolute bliss. We stayed at a cave hotel in Oia with a private pool overlooking the caldera. Every morning we'd have breakfast on our terrace, planning our future. Marcus wanted 4 kids, I wanted 2, so we compromised on 3. We'd raise them in Chicago, take family vacations to Disney World, and eventually retire somewhere warm. When we got back, we bought a 5-bedroom Tudor-style house in Lincoln Park. It had everything we wanted: a chef's kitchen for me since I loved cooking, a study for Marcus, and a backyard big enough for the kids we planned to have. The neighborhood was perfect: tree-lined streets, good schools, and close enough to both our jobs. I emptied my savings account, all $150,000 I'd carefully saved over 7 years, to help Marcus open his own practice. He'd always dreamed of being his own boss, of building something from the ground up. I believed in him completely. The practice, Chicago Cardiac Associates, opened 6 months after our wedding. I was there cutting the ribbons, so proud of my husband. Those first 3 years were wonderful. We had dinner together every night unless Marcus had emergency surgery. Thursday was date night without exception. We'd try new restaurants, or sometimes just walk along Lake Michigan talking about our days. Saturdays were for errands and house projects. Sundays were sacred. Just us, no work allowed. Marcus was thoughtful in ways that still make my chest ache when I remember. He'd leave notes in my lunch bag. He'd record my favorite shows when I worked late. On random Tuesdays, I'd find flowers on my desk with cards saying things like, "Just because it's Tuesday and you're beautiful." We started trying for a baby in year 2. When it didn't happen immediately, Marcus was supportive and patient. He held me when I cried every month, promising we'd figure it out together. We went to specialists, did tests, started treatments. Through it all, he never made me feel like I was failing him. But something shifted in year 4. It was subtle at first, like the seasons changing so gradually, you don't notice until all the leaves are gone. The changes started small. Marcus began staying late at the practice more often. First once a week, then twice, then almost every night. He said they were expanding, taking on new partners, dealing with insurance companies. I understood. Building a practice was demanding work. The emergency surgeries seemed to multiply. His phone would ring at dinner, and he'd apologize with tired eyes before rushing to the hospital. Sometimes he wouldn't come home until 3 or 4 in the morning, sliding into bed, trying not to wake me. But I always woke up. I'd smell his cologne fresh, like he'd just applied it, which struck me as odd after a long surgery. Our Thursday date nights became every other Thursday, then once a month, then disappeared altogether. When I suggested we needed to prioritize our time together, Marcus got defensive in a way he never had before. He accused me of not understanding the pressure he was under, of not supporting his career the way he supported mine. The notes in my lunch stopped. The random flowers disappeared. When I worked late, I'd come home to find he'd ordered takeout just for himself, the containers still on the counter. Small things, but they added up like tiny cuts. His phone became like an extension of his hand. He'd check it constantly during dinner, smiling at the screen in a way that made my stomach turn. When I asked what was so funny, he'd say it was just memes from the guys at work, but he'd angle the screen away from me. Our fertility struggles became a source of tension instead of unity. After one particularly difficult appointment where we learned IVF was our only option, Marcus said maybe it was a sign we weren't meant to have kids. The words hung between us for days. I started noticing inconsistencies in his stories. He'd say he was in surgery, but the OR schedule I could access showed no procedures. He'd mention grabbing drinks with Richard after work, but Richard's wife Emma would text me the same night about their family dinner. For my 33rd birthday, Marcus forgot completely. I'd made reservations at Gibson's Steakhouse, bought a new dress, got my hair done. I waited at the restaurant for an hour before he finally called, claiming an emergency surgery. I could hear traffic in the background, not hospital sounds. He sent an Uber Eats delivery of cupcakes to the house the next day with a gift card from Amazon. Not even a real card, just the printed email confirmation. The loneliness was suffocating. I'd lie in our king-size bed, feeling like a stranger in my own home. Friends asked how Marcus was, and I'd smile and lie because admitting the truth felt like admitting failure. My mother called every Sunday, and I'd paint pictures of a marriage that no longer existed. I threw myself into work, taking extra shifts, volunteering for committees, anything to avoid going home to an empty house. My colleagues started commenting that I was there more than the residents. The irony wasn't lost on me that I was avoiding home while Marcus claimed to be too busy to be there. Then came Thanksgiving. Marcus said he had to work, that the hospital was short-staffed. I spent the day with my parents in Seattle making excuses for his absence. But when I called the hospital to check on him, telling them I was his wife bringing dinner, they said Dr. Roth wasn't on schedule. When I confronted him later, he said he'd been called in last minute to a different hospital. The lie rolled off his tongue so easily it made me wonder how many others I'd believed. Christmas was the breaking point. The practice holiday party was at the Peninsula Hotel. Marcus introduced me to the new staff, including a young nurse named Natalie, who'd just moved from Miami. She was everything I wasn't: blonde where I was brunette, bubbly where I was reserved, 26 where I was 33. The way Marcus looked at her made my blood run cold. His eyes followed her across the room. When she laughed, he smiled like he'd accomplished something. When she complimented his speech, he actually blushed. I watched my husband fall in love with another woman in real time. During the party, Natalie kept finding reasons to approach Marcus. She needed advice about a patient. She wanted his opinion on a procedure. She was thinking about specializing in cardiac care, and could he mentor her? Each conversation lasted longer than the last, their heads bent close together, her hand occasionally touching his arm. Richard's wife, Emma, pulled me aside near the dessert table. She'd had too much wine and her words came out in a rush. Everyone at the practice was talking about Marcus and Natalie, how they took lunch together every day, how she stayed late whenever he did, how they'd been seen at a coffee shop on a Sunday morning when Marcus had told me he was playing golf. I confronted him that night after the party. He denied everything, said people were jealous of his success, that Natalie was just eager to learn. He turned it around on me, accused me of being paranoid, insecure, trying to sabotage his career. We slept in separate rooms that night. It was the beginning of the end. The truth came out on a rainy Tuesday in March. Marcus had left his iPad on the kitchen counter, something he never did. It buzzed with a message notification, and I saw her name. Just the letter N with a heart emoji. The preview showed, "Last night was incredible, can't wait for tonight." My hands shook as I picked up the device. I knew his passcode, his birthday, he'd never changed it. The messages between them went back months. Photos of them together. Her in lingerie he'd bought. Him shirtless in what was clearly her apartment. Plans for trips they had taken when he was supposedly at conferences. The words they used, the promises they made, the things they said about me. She called me boring. He agreed. She said I was holding him back. He said marrying me was his biggest mistake. She sent hearts and kiss emojis. He sent back words that used to be mine, beautiful, perfect, forever. I took screenshots of everything, emailing them to myself with numb fingers. Then I went to the bathroom and threw up until there was nothing left. I sat on the cold tile floor wondering how I'd missed it, how I'd been so blind. The credit card statements were next. I'd never checked them before, trusting Marcus completely with our finances. But now I pulled up everything. Charges at the Ritz-Carlton when he was supposedly at the hospital. $500 dinners at Alinea when he'd told me he was grabbing sandwiches between surgeries. A $12,000 bracelet from Cartier purchased the day after my birthday, the one he'd forgotten. The practice credit cards were even worse. We had 5 business cards for Chicago Cardiac Associates, all with both our names since I'd helped establish the business. Marcus was using them for everything. Hotels, restaurants, jewelry, even a lease on a Porsche 911 that I'd never seen. The total spending in just 3 months was over $70,000. I hired a private investigator named Tom Harrison, a former Chicago PD detective who specialized in infidelity cases. It felt surreal, like I was living someone else's life. Tom was professional and kind, assuring me this was more common than I'd think. Within a week, Tom had everything. Photos of Marcus and Natalie at Grant Park in the middle of the day when he should have been in surgery. Video of them entering the Palmer House Hotel, his hand on her lower back. Pictures of them shopping at Cartier on Michigan Avenue, trying on matching watches. The investigation revealed they'd been together for 7 months, starting just 2 weeks after she joined the practice. Tom also discovered Marcus had opened bank accounts I didn't know about, moving money from our joint accounts slowly over months. He'd been planning his exit for a while, making sure he'd be financially secure when he left. The house was in both our names, but he'd had papers drawn up trying to force a sale. He'd even consulted a divorce attorney 2 months before I found out about the affair. I confronted Marcus on a Thursday evening in April. I'd made his favorite dinner, lit candles, opened a bottle of wine. He came home late as usual, apologizing insincerely. I let him settle in, pour himself a drink, start eating. Then I placed the printed screenshots on the table. Then the credit card statements. Then the photos from Tom. One by one, like dealing cards. His fork clattered to his plate. The color drained from his face. He started to speak, to deny, but I held up my hand. I'd practiced what I wanted to say, and I needed to get it out. 8 years, Marcus. 8 years I loved you, supported you, believed in you. I gave you my savings to start your practice. I made excuses to my family when you missed holidays. I blamed myself when we couldn't have children. And this whole time you were planning your escape. He broke down then, but not with remorse, with anger that he'd been caught. He said I'd driven him to it. That I was cold, focused too much on work, didn't make him feel special anymore. He said Natalie understood him, made him feel alive, gave him the excitement our marriage lacked. She makes me feel 25 again, he said. With her, I'm not just going through the motions, I'm actually living. Those words destroyed something in me. 8 years reduced to going through the motions. Our entire life together dismissed as if it meant nothing. I asked him to leave that night. He packed a bag with remarkable efficiency, like he'd been ready for this moment. At the door, he turned and said he wanted a divorce, that he was going to marry Natalie. I want to be with someone who appreciates me, he said. Someone who sees me as more than just a paycheck. The irony of that statement, given that I'd funded his dreams, would have been funny if it hadn't hurt so much. I called my mother that night, sobbing so hard she could barely understand me. She wanted to fly out immediately, but I told her I needed time to process. My best friend Jennifer came over with wine and tissues, holding me while I cried until my eyes were swollen shut. The next morning I woke up to an empty house and a determination I didn't know I possessed. If Marcus wanted a divorce, he'd get one. But it would be on my terms. I hired Catherine Morrison, one of Chicago's most ruthless divorce attorneys. She came highly recommended by a partner at my hospital, whose own messy divorce had ended in her favor. Catherine was everything I needed, sharp, strategic, and completely unmoved by Marcus's attempts at manipulation. Our first meeting lasted 3 hours. I laid out everything: the affair, the financial deception, the business credit cards. Catherine's eyes lit up when I showed her the evidence Tom had gathered. She said I had one of the strongest cases she'd seen in her 20-year career. Marcus hired an attorney too, some hotshot from the Loop, who specialized in high-asset divorces. Their initial offer was insulting. Marcus wanted to keep the practice, the house, and half of my retirement savings. He claimed I'd contributed nothing to our assets, conveniently forgetting my $150,000 investment in his practice. The negotiations were brutal. Every meeting felt like emotional warfare. Marcus would show up with Natalie sometimes. Her hand on his arm, a diamond ring on her finger that I recognized from the credit card statements. She'd smirk at me across the conference room table, playing with her hair like a teenager. During one particularly heated session, Marcus's attorney tried to argue that the money I'd invested was a gift, not a loan or investment. Catherine produced emails from 8 years ago where Marcus explicitly called it an investment, promising me returns when the practice became profitable. His attorney's face fell. The discovery process revealed even more deception. Marcus had been siphoning money from the practice, writing himself bonuses while claiming to his partners that revenues were down. He'd taken out a line of credit against our house without my knowledge, forging my signature. Catherine said that alone could result in criminal charges if we wanted to pursue them. But the business credit cards were my ace in the hole. As co-owner of the practice, my name was on all 5 cards with a combined limit of $500,000. Marcus had been using them exclusively, assuming I'd never check. Every luxury purchase, every romantic dinner with Natalie, every piece of jewelry he'd bought her, it was all on cards that I legally controlled. Catherine researched the legal implications thoroughly. Since I was a co-owner and authorized user, I had every right to cancel the cards at any time. The only requirement was that I couldn't do it maliciously to harm the legitimate business operations. Personal purchases, however, were fair game. I started documenting everything. Every charge Marcus made, I recorded. The $40,000 deposit at the Four Seasons for their September wedding. The $25,000 Oscar de la Renta wedding dress from Neiman Marcus. The $8,000 honeymoon suite in Maui. All charged to the business cards. Meanwhile, the divorce proceedings dragged on. Marcus fought everything, trying to claim I was vindictive, that I was sabotaging his happiness out of jealousy. He told anyone who would listen that I was bitter about not being able to have children, that I was punishing him for finding love elsewhere. The practice started suffering. Other doctors noticed the tension, the missing funds, the way Marcus was distracted and volatile. 2 partners threatened to leave if he didn't get his personal life under control. Patients started requesting different doctors, uncomfortable with the drama that seemed to follow him. Marcus's relationship with Natalie became increasingly public. She moved into an expensive apartment in River North that he was paying for. She drove the Porsche he'd leased. She posted constantly on Instagram about their love story, how they'd found each other despite the obstacles, how their September wedding would be a new beginning. Her posts were particularly galling. Photos of them at restaurants where we'd celebrated anniversaries. Pictures from the Miami trip he'd taken while telling me he was at a medical conference. Her trying on wedding dresses with captions about finding her Prince Charming. Each post was a knife twist, but also evidence Catherine added to our file. By July, we'd reached a settlement. I got the house, my retirement accounts, and a significant portion of our joint savings. Marcus kept the practice, but had to buy out my investment with interest. He also had to assume all debt he'd accumulated during the affair. It wasn't everything I deserved, but it was enough. The final papers were signed in August, making our divorce official just 1 month before his planned wedding to Natalie. As I left the courthouse, Catherine mentioned offhandedly that I should review any joint accounts or credit cards to ensure they were properly closed. That's when I made my decision. I would wait until September 15th, until the very day of their wedding, to cancel every single business credit card. It was completely legal, entirely within my rights, and absolutely perfect. I went home and marked the date on my calendar with a red circle. For the first time in months, I smiled genuinely. Marcus thought he'd won, that he'd gotten everything he wanted. He had no idea what was coming. The months between the divorce and Marcus's wedding became my transformation period. I moved back into our Lincoln Park house, but I made it mine. I painted the walls colors Marcus had always vetoed, bright teals and warm corals. I turned his study into a yoga studio. I donated every piece of clothing he'd left behind to Goodwill, along with our wedding china that suddenly felt tainted. I threw myself into self-care with the intensity I'd once reserved for saving my marriage. Every morning started with yoga at 6, followed by a run along Lake Michigan. The physical activity cleared my head, made me feel strong in ways that weren't just about muscle. I joined a kickboxing class and imagined Marcus's face on the punching bag, which my instructor said was perfectly healthy. My career flourished without the constant worry about Marcus. I accepted the promotion to Director of Pharmaceutical Services that I'd been hesitating about for a year. The position came with a $40,000 raise and a corner office overlooking the lake. My team threw a celebration party, and for the first time in years I felt genuinely accomplished. I started therapy with Dr. Patricia Williams, a specialist in betrayal trauma. She helped me understand that Marcus's affair wasn't about my shortcomings, but about his character. We worked through the gaslighting, the manipulation, the way he'd made me question my own reality. Slowly, I began to trust my instincts again. The support group for divorced women met every Wednesday at a community center in Lincoln Park. There were 8 of us, all different ages, all with different stories, but united in our determination to rebuild. We called ourselves the Phoenix Club, rising from the ashes of our former lives. These women became my anchors, celebrating small victories like going to a restaurant alone or sleeping through the night without nightmares. Meanwhile, I maintained strategic connections with people from Marcus's world. Jessica, a nurse at Chicago Cardiac Associates, had never liked how Marcus treated the staff. She kept me informed about the wedding planning, forwarding me emails Natalie sent to everyone about dress codes, registry information, and how this would be the event of the year. The wedding was scheduled for September 15th at the Four Seasons Chicago. 300 guests, a 10-piece orchestra, flowers flown in from Holland, a 7-tier cake from Amy Beck Cake Design. The reception menu included lobster Wagyu beef and champagne that cost $300 a bottle. The total budget, according to Jessica, was approaching $200,000. Every single vendor was being paid with the business credit cards. Marcus had assured them all that payment would process the Monday after the wedding, standard practice for large events. He'd even bragged to colleagues about how he'd negotiated better rates by guaranteeing immediate payment. I kept detailed records of every transaction. The $40,000 deposit, the $15,000 for flowers, the $20,000 for catering, the $12,000 for photography and videography, the $8,000 for the band. It was like watching someone build a house of cards, knowing exactly when the wind would blow. 2 weeks before the wedding, an invitation arrived at my house. Thick cream cardstock with gold embossing requesting my presence at the marriage of Dr. Marcus Roth and Natalie Summers. There was a handwritten note from Marcus. "I hope you can be happy for me. Let's show everyone we're mature adults who've moved on." The audacity made me laugh out loud. He wanted me there as a prop proof that he was such a good guy that even his ex-wife supported his new marriage. I RSVP'd yes immediately. I invested in the perfect outfit. A red Valentino dress that hugged every curve I'd earned in the gym, 4-inch Louboutin heels that made my legs look endless, diamond earrings I'd bought myself with my promotion bonus. I booked a full day at the spa, massage, facial, manicure, pedicure. My hairdresser created an elegant updo that showed off my neck. The makeup artist gave me a subtle glow that made me look 5 years younger. I also prepared my wedding gift. Inside an elegant Tiffany blue box, I placed copies of my ownership documents for Chicago Cardiac Associates, highlighting my name on every business credit card. I added a single card with one sentence, "Best wishes for your future together. May you get exactly what you deserve." My best friend Jennifer agreed to attend as my +1. She was also in charge of recording everything on her phone just in case we needed evidence later. We rehearsed our entrance, our timing, exactly when I would make my move. It had to be perfect. The night before the wedding, I barely slept. Not from nerves, but from anticipation. At exactly noon on September 15th, I would call each credit card company and cancel all 5 cards. The timing was crucial. Too early, and Marcus might have time to fix it. Too late, and some charges might already be processed. I set 5 alarms on my phone, though I knew I wouldn't need them. This was a moment I'd been planning for months. As the sun rose on September 15th, I stood at my window overlooking Lincoln Park, coffee in hand, and smiled. Today, karma would be served at exactly the right temperature, ice cold. The Four Seasons Chicago had been transformed into what looked like a palace from a fairy tale. White orchids cascaded from every surface. Crystal chandeliers had been brought in specially for the occasion. The lobby was filled with guests in designer gowns and custom tuxedos, air-kissing and comparing jewelry. I arrived at exactly 2:45, 15 minutes before the ceremony was scheduled to begin. Heads turned as Jennifer and I walked through the lobby. Some faces showed surprise, others confusion, a few outright shock. Whispers followed in our wake like ripples on water. "Is that Layla? What is she doing here? Did Marcus really invite his ex-wife? She looks incredible." I kept my head high, smile serene, as if attending my ex-husband's wedding to his mistress was the most natural thing in the world. Jennifer stayed close, her phone discreetly recording the reactions. We found seats in the middle section, fifth row, perfect viewing position for what was about to unfold. The ballroom was spectacular, I had to admit. Thousands of roses in cream and blush created an aisle that looked like a garden path. Gold Chiavari chairs with silk cushions, a string quartet playing soft classical music. The altar was an arch of peonies and roses that must have cost more than most people's entire weddings. Marcus's colleagues from the hospital filled the groom's side. I recognized doctors, nurses, administrators, all looking slightly uncomfortable when they noticed me. His parents sat in the front row, his mother dabbing her eyes already. She'd called me after the divorce to say she was sorry that I'd always be the daughter she'd wished for. Now she was here playing the proud mother of the groom. Natalie's side was equally impressive. Her family had flown in from Florida, all perfectly tanned and dripping in jewelry. Her father, a real estate developer, looked like he'd stepped out of a casino. Her mother, obviously helped by the best plastic surgeons money could buy, was telling anyone who'd listen about the romantic proposal story, conveniently leaving out the part where Marcus had been married at the time. At exactly 3 o'clock, the music changed. The wedding party began their procession. 6 bridesmaids in lavender silk that probably cost $1,000 per dress. 6 groomsmen, including Richard, who couldn't meet my eyes as he passed. The flower girl Natalie's niece scattered rose petals that matched the color scheme perfectly. Then came Marcus walking with his parents. He looked good, I had to admit. The Tom Ford tuxedo fit perfectly. His hair was freshly cut. But I noticed the signs of stress, the tightness around his eyes, the way he kept touching his cufflinks, a nervous habit I knew well. When he saw me, he actually stumbled slightly. His mother had to steady him. The music changed to the wedding march. Everyone stood. And there was Natalie, a vision in $25,000 worth of Oscar de la Renta lace and tulle. The dress was admittedly stunning with a 10-foot train and hand-embroidered details that sparkled under the lights. Her veil was held by a diamond tiara that I recognized from the Cartier charges. She floated down the aisle like she was walking on clouds, her smile radiant, completely oblivious to what was coming. Her father handed her to Marcus with a comment about taking care of his little girl that made several people tear up. Marcus took her hands, and they turned to face the officiant. The ceremony began with readings about love conquering all obstacles. The irony was delicious. Marcus's cousin read 1 Corinthians, stumbling over the words about love being patient and kind. Natalie's sister sang a breathy version of At Last by Etta James that was slightly off-key. When it came time for the vows, Natalie went first. She talked about finding her soulmate when she least expected it, about how Marcus had shown her what true love really meant. She promised to stand by him through everything, to be his partner in all things. Several guests were crying. I bit my tongue to keep from laughing. Marcus's vows were even better. He talked about second chances, about finding light after darkness, about how Natalie had saved him from a life of mere existence. He actually said, with me sitting right there, that he'd never known real happiness until he met her. The audacity was breathtaking. They exchanged rings, platinum bands from Harry Winston that I knew cost $15,000 for the pair. The officiant pronounced them husband and wife. Marcus kissed Natalie like they were in a movie, dipping her backwards as the guests applauded. Rose petals fell from the ceiling in a dramatic flourish that must have required special rigging. The cocktail hour was held on the terrace overlooking Michigan Avenue. Champagne flowed freely, the $300 bottles Jennifer and I had read about. Past hors d'oeuvres included caviar oysters and tiny portions of Wagyu beef. Ice sculptures spelled out M and N. A jazz trio played softly in the corner. I mingled strategically, accepting condolences and congratulations with equal grace. Several of Marcus's colleagues expressed surprise at my presence. I simply smiled and said I wished them all the best, that moving on was the healthy choice. Dr. Kim from the hospital actually said I was the classiest woman he'd ever met. The reception ballroom was even more elaborate than the ceremony space. Tables covered in gold sequined linens, centerpieces that towered 3 feet high, explosions of roses and peonies. Each place setting had a gold charger, multiple pieces of silverware, and a menu card with gold calligraphy. The head table was on a raised platform like royalty holding court. Dinner was served in multiple courses: lobster bisque, Caesar salad with actual gold leaf, a choice between Chilean sea bass and beef Wellington, each course paired with a different wine. The wedding cake, when wheeled out, was a 7-tier masterpiece decorated with sugar flowers, so realistic, people took pictures thinking they were real. The speeches began during dessert. Richard, as best man, talked about Marcus finding his perfect match, carefully avoiding any mention of the years he'd been married to me. Natalie's sister gushed about true love and fairy tales coming true. Marcus's father spoke about the importance of choosing the right partner, which felt particularly tone-deaf given the circumstances. Then Marcus stood up, champagne glass in hand. He thanked everyone for coming, for celebrating their love. He made pointed comments about people who couldn't be happy for others' joy, about jealousy and bitterness. Several guests looked at me. I simply raised my glass in a mock toast. "This day represents a new beginning," Marcus said, his voice carrying across the room. "With Natalie, I've found someone who truly understands me, who supports my dreams, who makes every day an adventure. Some people are meant to be stepping stones to our real happiness. Today I'm grateful for every step that led me to my soulmate." The room erupted in applause. Natalie kissed him, tears streaming down her face. It was perfect. The moment was absolutely perfect. I stood up slowly, my movement drawing attention. Jennifer discreetly started recording. "I'd like to say something," I announced, my voice clear and strong. The room fell silent instantly. Marcus's face went pale. Natalie's smile froze. All 300 guests turned to stare at me, waiting. I walked to the microphone at the front of the room, my heels clicking against the marble floor, each step measured and deliberate. "Thank you, Marcus, for inviting me today," I began, looking directly at him. "It takes a special kind of courage to invite your ex-wife to your wedding. But then again, you've always been special, haven't you?" Nervous laughter rippled through the room. Marcus started to stand, but Richard pulled him back down. "I wanted to give you both a wedding gift," I continued, pulling the envelope from my purse. "Something that truly reflects the nature of your relationship. You see, Natalie, there's something you should know about how Marcus finances his grand gestures." The room was so quiet, you could hear the air conditioning humming. I opened the envelope, slowly pulling out the documents. Every single element of this beautiful wedding, from your dress to the flowers to the champagne you're drinking right now, was paid for with business credit cards from Chicago Cardiac Associates. Cards that, as co-owner of the practice, have my name on them. Cards that I have the legal right to control. Gasps echoed through the ballroom. Natalie's face was changing from confusion to horror. Marcus had turned gray. "As of noon today," I announced, checking my phone for effect, "all 5 cards have been canceled. The charges for this wedding will be reversed Monday morning. That's approximately $200,000 that the vendors will be seeking directly from you." The room exploded. Vendors who were present started moving toward the head table. The catering manager was already on his phone. The wedding planner looked like she might faint. Guests were talking over each other, voices rising in shock and disbelief. But I wasn't done. I walked closer to the head table, standing directly in front of Marcus and Natalie. "Natalie, sweetheart," I said, my voice dripping with false sympathy, "you should know that the Porsche you've been driving, the apartment in River North, the jewelry you're wearing right now, it was all paid for with money that wasn't his to spend. The practice is under investigation. The Illinois Medical Board has been notified. His medical license is under review. But I'm sure your love will survive poverty and disgrace, right? After all, your soulmates." Natalie's face crumpled. She looked at Marcus with dawning realization, then down at her wedding ring like it might burn her finger. The tears that had been from joy moments ago were now something else entirely. "Best wishes for your future together," I concluded, setting the envelope on their table. "May you both get exactly what you deserve." I turned and walked out, Jennifer right behind me, as the ballroom descended into complete chaos. We could hear shouting before the doors even closed behind us. The wedding planner was screaming about contracts. Natalie's father was yelling something about fraud. Marcus's voice, pleading and desperate, was lost in the storm. In the elevator, Jennifer showed me her phone. She'd captured everything, including the moment Natalie ripped off her veil and threw it at Marcus. We high-fived like teenagers as we walked through the lobby past arriving police officers who'd apparently been called by the hotel. The valet brought my car around, and as I drove away from the Four Seasons, I saw Natalie run out in her wedding dress, her makeup destroyed by tears, her father supporting her. Marcus came out seconds later, his tuxedo jacket gone, security guards preventing him from following her. I'd done it. I'd given them both exactly what they deserved, and I'd done it completely legally without breaking a single law or contractual obligation. Catherine Morrison would be proud. The fallout was immediate and catastrophic. By Sunday morning, the wedding disaster was all over social media. Someone had posted a video of Natalie screaming at Marcus in the hotel lobby, calling him a fraud and a liar, throwing her wedding ring at his face. The hashtag Chicago Wedding Disaster was trending locally. Jessica called me Sunday afternoon with updates from inside Chicago Cardiac Associates. The other partners had called an emergency meeting for Monday morning. They'd already contacted their lawyers about removing Marcus from the practice. The investigation into the financial irregularities had revealed he'd been stealing from the practice for over a year, not just for personal expenses, but gambling debts nobody knew about. The vendors weren't playing around. The Four Seasons filed a lawsuit by Tuesday for the full $40,000 deposit plus damages. The florist, the photographer, the band, they all wanted their money immediately. Marcus's personal credit cards were maxed out, and he had no way to pay even a fraction of what he owed. Natalie moved back to Florida within a week. Her Instagram, which had been full of wedding photos and love quotes, was scrubbed clean. A mutual acquaintance told me Natalie's father had hired a lawyer to sue Marcus for fraud, claiming he'd misrepresented his financial situation. The marriage was annulled before the honeymoon was supposed to end. Marcus tried to salvage his reputation at the hospital, but the damage was done. Patients requested different doctors. Colleagues avoided him in the halls. The younger residents who'd once looked up to him now whispered and laughed when he passed. His surgical privileges were suspended pending the investigation. By October, Marcus was officially removed from Chicago Cardiac Associates. The practice bought out his shares at a massive loss to him, using that money to partially repay what he'd stolen. He had to sell his condo in River North at a loss in a bad market. The Porsche was repossessed. His attorney advised him to declare bankruptcy. The Illinois Medical Board investigation was thorough and damning. While they didn't revoke his license entirely, he was placed on probation for 3 years with strict oversight requirements. No hospital in Chicago would touch him. He ended up taking a position at a small clinic in Rockford, making a third of his previous salary. Richard reached out to me in November. He said Marcus was living in a studio apartment, driving a 20-year-old Honda Civic and working 60-hour weeks just to make ends meet. He'd aged 10 years in 2 months. Richard thought I should know, maybe thinking I'd feel guilty. I didn't. Meanwhile, my life flourished in ways I hadn't imagined possible. The promotion at Northwestern came with opportunities to speak at conferences, to publish papers, to shape policy. I was invited to join the board of the Illinois Pharmaceutical Association. My team at the hospital grew from 15 to 35 people. I traveled to places Marcus had always promised we'd go but never did. 2 weeks in Italy, walking through Rome and Florence without checking my phone once. A month in Japan during cherry blossom season, finding peace in temples and gardens. A cruise through the Greek islands with the Phoenix Club, 6 divorced women celebrating their freedom. I started dating again around Christmas, nothing serious at first. Coffee dates that didn't go anywhere. Dinners that were pleasant but sparkless. Then in January, I met Daniel at a medical conference in San Diego. He was a pediatric surgeon from Denver, divorced himself with a 12-year-old daughter. He made me laugh until my sides hurt, and never once made me feel like I needed to be anything other than myself. Daniel was everything Marcus wasn't. He called when he said he would. He remembered small details from our conversations. He introduced me to his daughter after 3 months, and she and I bonded over our love of baking. He never made me feel like I was competing with anyone for his attention. When he looked at me, he really saw me. In March, almost exactly a year after discovering Marcus's affair, I ran into him at Whole Foods in Lincoln Park. He was buying a single frozen dinner and a six-pack of cheap beer. His clothes hung loose on his frame. His hair was completely gray now. When he saw me, his whole body seemed to deflate. We stood there in the frozen foods aisle, two people who'd once promised to love each other forever. I was coming from yoga, glowing with health and happiness. He looked like he'd aged 20 years in 12 months. His hands shook slightly as he adjusted his basket. "Layla," he said, his voice rough. "You look good." "Thank you," I replied simply. He stared at me for a long moment, then said, "I'm sorry. For everything. I destroyed everything good in my life. I lost you. I lost my practice. I lost Natalie. I'm working at a clinic in Rockford now. I live in a studio apartment. I eat alone every night. This is what I deserve, isn't it? I could have been cruel. I could have agreed, twisted the knife, celebrated his downfall. But looking at him, this shell of the man I'd once loved, I felt nothing but peace. He was no longer my problem, my burden, my source of pain. "Marcus," I said gently, "I forgive you. Not for your sake, but for mine." I needed to let go of the anger to move forward. What you're experiencing now isn't about what you deserve. It's about the consequences of your choices. Every action has a reaction. You chose deception, and it chose you back. His eyes filled with tears. "Do you think I'll ever be happy again?" I touched his shoulder briefly, the first time I'd touched him since he'd walked out of our house. "That's entirely up to you," I said. "But happiness built on someone else's pain never lasts. Maybe start by being honest, really honest with yourself about who you are and what you want. Build from there." I left him standing there among the frozen dinners and walked out into the bright March sunshine. Jennifer was waiting in the car, ready for our weekend trip to Michigan wine country. As we drove away, I didn't look back. There was nothing there for me anymore. Life has a way of teaching us lessons we don't want to learn. My divorce from Marcus taught me about betrayal, but more importantly, it taught me about resilience. That wedding, as dramatic as it wasn't about revenge. It was about justice, about consequences, about the universe balancing its books. Some people might say I was cruel, that I should have just let Marcus and Natalie have their happiness. But their happiness was built on my pain, funded by theft, constructed on a foundation of lies. I simply removed myself from the equation and let reality take over. The cards were in my name. I had every legal right to cancel them. The timing was my choice, and I chose the moment that would reveal the truth most clearly. The $200,000 bill they faced, that was the cost of their deception made tangible. Every vendor who demanded payment was a reminder that actions have consequences. Every lawsuit filed was karma demanding its due. I didn't destroy Marcus's life. He did that himself with every lie, every betrayal, every stolen moment with Natalie, while I waited at home. Daniel proposed to me last month, exactly 2 years after my divorce was finalized. It wasn't a grand gesture at the Hancock Center or a vineyard in Napa. It was quiet, intimate, just us on his apartment balcony in Denver, the mountains in the distance. The ring wasn't 3 carats from Tiffany. It was his grandmother's reset with a simple diamond, perfect in its imperfection. I said yes without hesitation. Not because I needed to be married, but because I wanted to share my life with someone who saw me, valued me, chose me every single day. Our wedding will be small, maybe 50 people probably, in his parents' backyard in Boulder. No ice sculptures or champagne that costs more than most people's car payments. Just family friends, good food, and real love. The Phoenix Club threw me an engagement party last week. These women who'd walked through fire with me, who'd held me when I couldn't hold myself, who'd celebrated every small victory along the way. We toasted with Prosecco to second chances, to finding ourselves, to learning that sometimes the best thing that can happen is losing what we thought we needed. Marcus sent me a message through LinkedIn last week, congratulating me on my engagement. He said he'd heard from mutual friends that I was happy that I'd found someone good. He's working at a community clinic now, making a difference in underserved communities. He's sober, having addressed the gambling problem that contributed to his downfall. He's alone but working on himself. He said watching everything crumble taught him what actually mattered, too late to save us, but maybe not too late to save himself. I didn't respond, but I hope he finds peace. Not happiness necessarily. Not yet, but peace with who he is and what he's done. Growth comes from discomfort, from facing the worst parts of ourselves and choosing to be better. Maybe losing everything was what Marcus needed to find himself. Natalie, from what I hear through the grapevine, married a real estate developer in Miami last year. A small ceremony, family only. She doesn't post on social media anymore. I hope she learned something too about building happiness on solid ground, rather than someone else's foundation. As for me, I learned that my worth was never dependent on being Marcus's wife. I learned that love shouldn't require you to make yourself smaller to fit into someone else's life. I learned that the best revenge truly isn't revenge at all. It's building a life so beautiful, so full, so authentically yours that the person who hurt you becomes utterly irrelevant. That wedding gift I gave Marcus wasn't about destroying him. It was about freeing myself. Every dollar that got reversed was a chain breaking. Every vendor demanding payment was a truth being told. Every shocked gasp from those 300 guests was validation that I wasn't crazy, that what he'd done was wrong, that I deserved better. Sometimes the best gift you can give someone is exactly what they deserve. Marcus and Natalie deserved each other with all the complications that entailed. They deserved the bill for their charade. They deserved the truth coming out in the most public way possible. And I deserved to walk away from that chaos with my head held high, knowing I'd played by the rules and still won. Today I woke up in Daniel's arms in the house we're buying together in Denver. It's not a 5-bedroom Tudor in Lincoln Park. It's a modest 3-bedroom ranch with a garden where his daughter grows tomatoes and a kitchen where we cook together every Sunday. It's not what I'd planned when I was 26 and thought life had a specific blueprint. It's better. Sometimes I think about that woman who stood in the Four Seasons ballroom delivering justice in a red Valentino dress. I'm proud of her strength, her timing, her refusal to be a victim. But I'm prouder of who I've become since. Someone who knows her worth. Someone who doesn't accept less than she deserves. Someone who understands that sometimes the best thing that can happen is losing what you thought you needed to find what you actually deserve. Marcus gave me an unexpected gift with his betrayal. He set me free from a life that was slowly suffocating me. He pushed me to find strength I didn't know I had. He forced me to rebuild from scratch and discover that I was capable of creating something far better than what I'd lost. For that, I'm genuinely grateful. To anyone watching who's been betrayed, who's had their life shattered by someone they trusted, know this: the pain you're feeling is real and valid, but it's not permanent. The person who hurt you doesn't get to define your worth or determine your future. You have the power to rebuild, to grow, to become someone even you don't recognize in the best possible way. Sometimes the universe has to destroy what you have to make room for what you deserve. Sometimes you have to lose everything to realize you already had everything you needed within yourself. Sometimes a wedding that ends in chaos is exactly the beginning you didn't know you were looking for. That day at the Four Seasons, I didn't just cancel credit cards. I canceled my subscription to a life that wasn't serving me. I canceled my role as the supportive wife who accepted whatever was given. I canceled the narrative that Marcus had written where he was the hero and I was the obstacle to his happiness. Now I write my own story, one where betrayal led to breakthrough, where loss led to liberation, where a wedding disaster became the catalyst for a life more beautiful than I could have imagined. And that, I think, is the best wedding gift of all. What would you have done in my situation? Have you ever had to stand up to someone who betrayed you in such a public way? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, Please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Share this with someone who needs to hear that they're stronger than they know, that their pain has a purpose, and that sometimes the best revenge is simply living well. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember, you deserve someone who chooses you every single day, not just when it's convenient. Stay strong and know that better days aren't just coming, they're already here waiting for you to claim them.